Hey everyone, Kevin here. Thanks for joining me again. Today we're working on a small project, relatively speaking, for the Jeep J10 pickup truck. So as I talked about in the kind of the introduction of that truck, the gas tank essentially was just full of just crud. Right, the original sending unit had completely disintegrated. The sock was down at the bottom. I mean, it was just the gas had sat for no telling how long, right? So took a little bit of time, had to kind of drain off all that old varnishy, terrible gas. And then on top of that, I had to try to then kind of get all that dirt, debris, rust, and everything. So I had taken apart the sending unit, took off the side, actually had to go in there. So the way I approached it was, after kind of doing a little research on the web, I had taken some vinegar and water mixture, essentially, and just poured it in there, and then just let it sit for like a day. Essentially, just close it up and just let it sit out in the backyard, and just kind of like let it sit there and stew, right? And then kind of from there went back, drained it, kind of refilled it with some water, and tried to essentially go in there and really try to scrub it. So I had taken an old brush, essentially I had kind of tore it down and made it into essentially built kind of a hook and wire system. They could kind of feed in there and try to scrub and do the best I could, just kind of shaking it up, getting anything and everything that could out. From there, drained as good as I could. The interesting part is right here where the sending unit is. It has like kind of a lip on the inside that actually hooks around, so you can't just stand this up and drain it. Same thing for the fill hoses. These don't just end right there flush with the outside. They actually kind of protrude into the tank a little bit. So you can't just stand it up on its end and actually get everything out. So because there's water, at least, I was able to just kind of set it out in the sun and just let it bake, right? Just kind of let it bake off. And then again, after that, kind of took and had to scrub and take the brush in there as good as I could from this, kind of spin it around and just try to get everything kind of knocked loose. Sit it up on an end, try to get everything kind of to the bottom, right? And then I was able to take an old vacuum cleaner and essentially just kind of suck all that dirt and debris. And by the time I was done, I mean, it was just a ton of junk, right, that I had kind of sucked out. But at least, I feel like it's pretty good and clean. Kind of took a flashlight, shine down in there, kind of looked to see what it looked like. So feeling pretty good about it. I think I'll probably put a little inline filter on the gas line going to the carburetor just to be sure. But I think, luckily it was at least a plastic gas tank, so it wasn't fully rusted out itself. Just had a lot of buildup and junk on the inside. So from there, now it's starting to try to put it back together, right? So with the BJ's off-road, got a new sending unit assembly from them. Tried buying one off of Amazon, and it was not the right setup. Surprise, surprise. Because I guess a lot of the J series Cherokees, Wagoneers had a top-mounted sending unit, where at least this year model of J10 had a side-mounted sending unit. So with that, had to go and get one specifically made for the side. That now they say you have to do a little bit of calibration and adjustment on kind of once you get it in there, and actually kind of may have to bend the arm a little bit to get it dialed in just right. But at least you can kind of start getting it put back together a little bit. It just has to kind of feed in there, and then has this appropriate O-rings and lock rings and things that came with it to kind of tie it all back together. So I'm going to take a few minutes here and try to go ahead and do that. And then also got a new filler sock that goes on the inside. So kind of start putting this together and see how this kind of works out. All right, so after kind of playing with it a little bit, so there's actually a couple of tabs in the back of the sending unit, and there's a couple of notches in the opening to the gas tank, and I found those have to kind of be clocked just right. One of them was also kind of bent out a little bit, so I had to kind of bend it back in so it properly line up and actually slide into it. And essentially what I do is take it, lay it on the ground vertical, and then I'm able to kind of get the O-ring placed properly and then put that locking ring on. So. And also while it was vertical, I was able to go ahead and get the larger locking nut on. I don't have that fully tight, just kind of got it started. But from here, able to drop it down onto the skid plate. A little bit of a bang. But yeah, then see, I got this Let's have this 180 from proper here. Let's see. Yeah. Looks like so. So yeah, so then essentially as we, went, Dad helped and he actually pulled this out from under the truck. But it actually, the gas tank kind of mounted in its own skid plate / mounting bracket, kind of all in one. And with that, there were carriage bolts going through the bed, and the square of the head, these nuts were so seized up that it ultimately essentially was just strip the sheet metal out, right? So with that, I'll have to come through, cut these off. I have 3 of the 4 that didn't come loose. With that, part of the challenge is going to be actually getting it back in, right? So it's one of those, I can put some large washers and just regular hex bolts in there. What I prefer though is still to do carriage bolts. So what I'm planning to do, at least I think it's a clever idea. We'll see how clever it is once I actually execute it. So I bought some of these carriage washers. I should you can kind of see essentially these, kind of barbed washers that are actually designed for wood. So my thought is actually kind of knock the barbs off. Just take a grinder, kind of knock those off, and then essentially be able to, put these on top of the bed, drop the bolt through, and kind of get the nut started on the bottom, and then actually go through in the truck bed and actually kind of tack these down, kind of in these already nice cutout areas in the carriage washer, and that'll essentially then act like a new piece of sheet metal to keep the carriage head from spinning while trying to tighten the nut from the bottom side. So we'll see how successful I am with that here in a few minutes as we kind of get this from the truck and get everything finalized and back in. So join me over there in just a minute. All right, so what I'm doing essentially is taking these carriage washers essentially that are actually designed to go into wood, right? You can see kind of the barbs there. Essentially I'm just kind of knocking those off, and do that here real quick, kind of show you what I got going on. Put in some noise cancellation. So grind it off. We're essentially just a nice flat washer. So you can see essentially the barbs on one side there. So I'll essentially turn this over, cut the rest of it off. You'll also notice I'm grinding off the plating. Right, these are, I can't remember if these were just a galvanized coating or just, which you definitely don't want to weld on, or just essentially some type of other coating. I didn't look at the label when I picked these up from the big box store. But yeah, so I got a couple more of these to do, get these knocked out. And then we'll show you how I'm gonna kind of weld them into the floor of the truck to work as the new mount for a carriage bolt. Right, so it goes in and keeps it from rotating once it's in like the factory had, but like I said, they're pretty much stripped out because it was just sheet metal. So, all right, hang tight. All right, so I came back with the wire wheel. Just tried to clean the bed floor up just around kind of where the areas where the bolts go through. I'll have to come through, take the truck outside and just kind of clean all this, years of just dirt, debris, and rust and things like that's accumulated, and take maybe a bigger wire wheel or drum wheel and try to go through and clean up the bed a little bit more. Hopefully it doesn't open up too many bad spots. But yeah, so now I'm able to take the carriage washers that are cut the points off of and a bolt, kind of drop it into each of the holes, front and back on the bed here, and then weld them in. So essentially what I'm doing is I am putting the bolts through just to make sure that they're lined up properly, and I'll tack them, and then I can pull the bolts out and kind of finish welding them in. But yeah, I think hopefully this will work all right. Hopefully if I can get good welds on the steel, at least hopefully it'll hold when I put the gas tank in the bottom and the nuts up and everything. So let's get this tacked into place, and then I'll work on finishing it up. Got the welder on. Alright, not sure how well that shows up on the video down there, but at least kind of get those tacked in. So I'll start working on kind of getting the others all doing the same. Alright, move the iPad a little closer, I don't know if you can see. Kind of got those tacked in. So now I'll look, I might have to adjust the weld settings a little bit, slow down the wire a little bit. But yeah, at least I can kind of go through and finish kind of welding these around. I'm probably not going to do a complete 360 perimeter weld on them. It's probably overkill. But we'll try to make sure, like I said, get them welded good enough to where when I go to torque the nuts from the bottom side, it doesn't break the washer loose. But yeah. Always handy to have a magnet around, I guess. Alright, so yeah, I work on grinding these down, clean them up a little bit, knock off some of the high spots, and get it to where, I don't know if I'll do a bed coating or just paint this and throw a rubber floor mat down or what exactly. It's, I mean, this bed's never going to be perfect. This truck lived a hard life and had some pretty good dents in it, so I'm not sure what they hauled in this thing to beat the bed floor up so bad, but so I'm not worried about making it perfect. Yeah, at least from here, let me kind of clean this up, then I can drop the bolts back in or paint it up a little bit, drop the bolts back in, and then get underneath to put the gas tank back under. All right, so got the tank put together, got it in the mounting skid plate, mounting bracket and everything. Had to actually jack this side of the truck up a little bit to get it to clear and get up under the frame rails there. Yeah, so now I'm gonna try to slide it up under here, see if I either lift it in place by hand or if I take my floor jack and actually try to get up under it and try to lift it that way. That's probably the easier way, just to try to get it up there and get it in place, all while then trying to get the nuts on from the bottom side. Put a couple of boards on top of the carriage bolts coming down from the bed, hoping to kind of keep them in place when I go to push this up in there, so I'm not pushing the bolts up out from under out of the bed. Alright, so ran ahead and ran new flex lines for the supply and the return lines. I think the return line actually may have been okay just because when running it off the gas can, it would actually, essentially the fuel filter on these has like I guess a pressure relief or overflow so it would feed back, and it would actually feed back into, originally it was running on the ground. So I put a bucket under it and was actually catching it. So that was actually decent. But the supply line, I could actually see with kind of a flashlight, it was totally rusted out. So honestly, I just didn't even want to try to fight it. So I was just gonna run new line all the way to the front with flex line, and we'll go with that. So yeah, so now I just need to get, there is a line, I need to do a little research, I guess. There's a line that runs actually from the top of the transfer case back into the top of the gas can. If anybody knows, you can comment along as well what exactly that's for. I'm guessing it's some type of vent hose, and I guess I don't know, maybe it's an EPA thing from back in '81. They were actually trying to dump it back into the tank, so it would essentially pull from that instead of just out into the environment. So yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So I gotta climb around the other side and get that hooked up, because it was kind of a short hose and it was actually crimped on permanently. So try to see if I can get that hooked up here. Excuse me there. All right, so for running the fuel line, I'm pretty much just gonna take the flex line and just follow the original hard line back to the front. See if we can just follow that, and then should be at least relatively safe. See how this kind of route's going up through the front of the truck. All right, gas tank's in. I got the supply and return lines in here. Kind of got them zip tied, following the factory lines. Got the skid plate kind of mounted up. You can see there's kind of a bolt back there in the very back. There's actually two, but I only had one of them handy. So I got that in. Thing fits pretty tight. You can see I guess the previous owner had put glass packs, looks like a glass pack muffler on here, and can't quite tell it. If you look at the back, it's actually got the tailpipe delete, because it's essentially rotted completely off, pretty much right behind the axle there, and it fallen off. So at some point we'll have to work on that, but at least got this running better. Got this fuel lines run, fuel tank hopefully is all good and clean. I'll put a filter on it no matter what before the fuel pump. But yeah, no, I think at least some decent progress today. Okay, I got covered in dirt and soot and everything else from climbing up under this thing. The muffler is just rusted all to pieces, so anytime you touch it, it just burst into 1,000 pieces, full of rust and everything else. But got this ply line run up to the fuel pump here, so let's get that run. So yeah, at least got the fuel tank in, new filter sock, everything else over here. Probably can't see it very well, but at least it's up under the truck. See, kind of up in there. And hey, also got the fenders welded up on the driver's side since the last time we talked as well. Got a little Bondo first layer on there. Need to do a little more sanding, but work in progress. So thanks for joining me. Here, Bane One Garage. Appreciate you kind of just checking out progress as we continue along with the J10. Hopefully next time have the return line all finished up, and then try to actually crank it, get it running again. Actually, this time off of its own gas tank instead of off of a 2-gallon gas can sitting in the bed of the truck. So fingers crossed. It's been sitting for a little while. Fingers crossed it'll fire right back up. But thanks for joining me. If this is interested, please like, subscribe, and we will see you next time.